Welcome to the Good Growing Podcast. I am Chris Enroth, horticulture educator with University of Illinois Extension, coming at you from Macomb, Illinois, and we have got a great show for you today. I am stuck to everything, covered in syrup. Your resident waffle expert here today. It is our Halloween episode, and so I am dressed up in the height of fashion, I would say. I have spent weeks and weeks putting this costume together, and then I ordered something online, and this showed up. So I'm a waffle. If you're listening, we'll leave a link below for you to go and watch this on YouTube. And you know, I am not doing this by myself. I am joined, as always, every single week by horticulture educator Yukon Cornelius in Jacksonville. Yukon, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you. It's good to see you, Waffle Man.
It's good to see you, prospector. You have a friend behind you.
The Bumble came with for the podcast, so it should be good.
Well, very good. So have you been prospecting recently?
No, I haven't had time. Maybe this weekend I'll get to some prospecting once it cools off.
What's the pickaxe?
It's too hot right now for this.
It is too hot. Ah, there it is. What's it taste like? Doesn't he lick it? Yeah.
Nothing.
Oh, yes. Oh, my goodness. So you are the spitting image of Yukon Cornelius. So this is the best thing that can happen right now. A waffle and Yukon Cornelius sitting here chatting on a podcast.
Figured I might as well do it before my beard turns completely white, and I don't have to switch to Santa Claus. So
that's right. Yes. Well, at least you come built in with everything you need. So, yeah. Well, today, Ken Johnson, we will be chatting about some spooky plant diseases, maybe some things that have happened in history that might have written or changed the course of things that were to be. And so, but that's how they are now. And so here to talk to us about some of these spooky plant diseases, we have Dr. Chelsea Harbach from Iowa State University. I don't know if I should say Royal Academy, but Chelsea, welcome to the show.
Hi, Chris. Hi, Yukon.
Hello.
Well, we are so happy to have you here, Chelsea. And could you describe to our listeners, our viewers can see you, but describe to our listeners, who are you and what are you wearing today?
So I'm Chelsea. I'm, as you mentioned, here at Iowa State University. I might look familiar. I've done a couple podcasts with these guys before when I was a commercial ag extension educator for University of Illinois. I got a new job almost exactly a year ago. My first day here at Iowa State as the plant disease diagnostician was on Halloween of last year. I didn't dress up last year. I'm going to dress up this year, and this is what I'm going to wear. Same thing I'm wearing now, which is my corgi costume. It's just kind of my default go-to corgi onesie that is complete with the tail and everything.
Got to have the tail. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, just a little one.
Yeah. Well, it gets in the way as you're looking at the microscope and you're trying to get comfortable. Yeah.
Yep.
Well, very nice. Well, Ken and we visited you recently, Chelsea, and we just wanted to say we really did enjoy checking out your new digs. You have a fantastic operation there over at Iowa State University in their diagnostician clinic. And we saw so much, and we're very excited. So we're happy that you're still crossing the river to Illinois to chat with us today about plant disease.
Well, Illinois is my home state, so I will continue to hang out with you guys as long as you'll have me.
We'll hold you to that.
Yes. And as Ken says, the corn tastes better here. So, well, Ken, I guess we should be diving into our spooky topics for this week. So would you mind kicking us off, please?
Yeah, so I think that the first one we're going to talk about is Salem witch trials and how plant disease or ergot, however you pronounce it, influenced all of that.
Yeah, so this is kind of debated by historians, but there's a lot of people who believe that the Salem witch trials were a result of a plant disease epidemic in rye in the 1600s. So, Salem witch trials obviously happened in Salem, Massachusetts. The year of like where most of the burnings took place was like late 1692. By May 1693, 19 people had been burned at the stake. And people like plant pathologists, some historians think that it's possible that conditions were favorable in 1691, the year that the rye would have been sown and then harvested following in 1692, that the conditions were favorable for a disease that's caused by a fungus to proliferate on the rye crop. And since it was early enough in human history where we didn't have any concept or knowledge of the fact that plants get sick, it's likely that people, as they were harvesting this rye, saw these blackened kernels. They're also like blackened and elongated, and didn't think anything of it. Had no idea that that was a fungus that they were harvesting and processing with the rest of the rye. And so, this ergot, like I said, is caused by a fungal pathogen. The pathogen is Claviceps purpurea, and this pathogen produces a couple of alkaloids, lysergic acid and ergotamine. Lysergic acid is like a precursor to LSD. So these are both like hallucinogenic, like mycotoxins. And if the black fungal structures are harvested with the rest of the grain and processed into bread, you have obviously people eating mycotoxin contaminated bread. And as these are hallucinogenic, some of the other things that this fungus would cause included convulsions, spasms, the hallucinations, kind of like a skin crawling sensation, and erratic behaviors. So all these things which, people could think that there's something, prior to a lot of science, if you see these kinds of symptoms in a person, or you might not know that they're having a reaction to something they ate. You're going to think that there's something supernatural going on with them. So people thought witch back then. Now again, this is kind of debated. If you go to the Salem witch trials website, they have a whole post about debunking the like contaminated grain theory or something like that, where they talk about how, if the grain was contaminated, theoretically everybody who's eating that rye bread would be getting contaminated bread. There is a page that suggests that the erratic behavior was seen in young girls whose immune systems hadn't fully developed, but that doesn't explain why don't we see it in young boys too? So yeah, it's kind of debated whether this is something that actually happened, but the idea is pretty sensational, and so I think that's why there's been the story has persisted, and it's so long ago that we have no way of saying like definitively yes or no this didn't happen. So people continue to run with this story, and it is a fun story. I mean, it's a fun theory, I think.
That happens to me every time I eat honey oat. So yes. Mm-hmm.
I sure hope not, because the disease. It's called rye-induced ergotism, which is also known as Saint Anthony's fire, and you can get gangrene as a result of ingesting ergot. Um, so it's like potentially like life-threatening. Not only, if you're perceived as a witch, but also like, if you have a limb that turns gangrenous. Um, so yeah, hopefully it doesn't happen to you every time you eat your bread.
So were they blaming the behavior of the young girls that had eaten the bread? Were they the young girls, the ones being persecuted, or were they? Wow. So I thought maybe they were pointing to someone else saying you're hurting the young girls, but it was the young girls. Wow.
That's my understanding of what I've read. Is that their erratic behavior was like, oh, they are doing witchy stuff.
Witches.
So
Mhm.
before we freak everybody out, there's safeguards against this nowadays, right?
Yes, yeah. I mean, now we know what ergot is. It's really easy to separate ergot infected kernels from regular kernels. So the any grain that goes for processing goes through like a seed cleaning process to separate out those foreign bodies, which would include those fungal bodies that are called sclerotia, from the seed. And there's even sometimes growers will get like, if you have, so we have fungicides, which help. A timely application of fungicides can help. But when the grain gets harvested, if you take it to the elevator, they're gonna kind of rate the quality of your like lot of seed, and that includes the amount of foreign bodies, which includes like cracked grain and also sclerotia, those fruiting bodies, or not, they're not fruiting bodies, they're just fungal bodies. But yeah, so we don't have to worry about it anymore. However, I have heard stories of so there's I can't find the video online anymore, but on the American Phytopathological Society, retired plant pathology professor from University of Illinois, Wayne Peterson, who was a field crops pathologist, told a story about how he had ergot kernel or ergot sclerotia in his lab, and because he was also a teacher, so he like kept these things in a sealed container for class. But he got a call from University of Illinois Police Department one night, saying that like a student that worked for him was like threatening his roommate, saying that like he was a demon or something, and that like he had to like kill him. So something like that, to that effect. And they were like, we interviewed this guy and he said that what he took was something from your lab. And Wayne was like, oh, this guy took some of my ergot sclerotia and had a bad trip. And so I think ergot sclerotia are probably kept a little, like if people keep them for educational purposes, I bet that people probably store them a little bit more securely nowadays.
Oh, fascinating. So now in my head, I'm seeing all of these puritanical witch hunter people. They're just tripping on some bad bread. It's like everybody
Basically.
was really messed up.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a theory.
Wow.
So like, if maybe it affected young people more, if they didn't have, as developed of an immune system. And like, it makes you wonder, like, if this theory holds, like, were there some like older, more mature people who were just having like a super mild trip, that like, didn't have all the convulsions and stuff that maybe younger people did. I don't know. We'll never know. but it's definitely a fun theory to try and explain what happened back then, because otherwise, like, I don't know, there's not a lot of reason for what happened.
Fascinating.
Mm-hmm.
Build a time
Yeah.
machine, go back and find
Mhm.
out.
Yeah,
I
right.
don't know if I want to go back there.
Yeah, I don't think I do either.
Bring your own bread.
Yeah, bring your own bread. Yeah, I can't drink the water. I'm not going to eat anything you give me. So,
Mm-hmm.
well, okay, Chelsea. Well, let's switch gears here and let's talk about the Irish potato famine and just how did that? I guess let's talk about how did that come about, and then how, like, as I also want to kind of dig into like how you as a pathologist dive into diagnosing plant disease, and so can you give us a backstory for the Irish potato famine, please?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it's funny. I learned about the Irish potato famine in high school. I don't know, maybe even grade school. But when it was taught to me, at that point, like they never mentioned, like, okay, there was something that happened to the potatoes, but they never like said what. So like I had no idea what plant pathology was until my second semester of junior year of college.
Hmm.
And that's when I learned that the Irish potato famine was a result. Well, so there's a multitude of like political things that went into kind of the the situation that caused the Irish potato famine to be as impactful for the Irish as it was. But at its at the Irish potato famine like wouldn't have happened if it weren't for a plant pathogen.
Mhm.
So
And the English also.
well,
Those
yeah,
two
yeah, yeah.
things
Well,
together.
yes. Yeah. Like it was definitely like basically a recipe for disaster
Mhm.
between the political stuff from the British. Um, as a result of some of the political stuff, the Irish were pretty reliant on potato as like their sole source of sustenance. Potato is like one of very few foods on which like a human can like actually like survive by just like eating this one thing. And they were like very easy to grow in like any environment, any kind of soil. They were highly like high yielding, and would store over winter. So they were like, for the Irish at that time, a really good source of food given all the political stuff. um the unfortunate thing is that they were relying on one single cultivar of potato, the lumper, which is like if you go look at pictures of the lumper, like it is actually like a lumpy potato. It's kind of funny. Um, so basically they had a monoculture across Ireland of a single type of potato. One like set like just it was just homogenous. Like there's you're really putting yourself at a big risk there. So they're not quite sure when the pathogen that causes the Irish potato famine arrived in Ireland. They believe it was sometime after 1842, likely 1844. But the first like crop that they noticed a significant reduction in yield was in 1845 when they had I believe like two-thirds less, or like two-thirds of the crop was like gone because of the pathogen. And then the following year they lost three-quarters of the crop. And then the environmental conditions like were not as great for the disease to occur in 1847, but because of the low yields in the years prior, they didn't have as much seed to plant. So even though they had better conditions, they still didn't have enough potatoes to sustain the population. And then in 1848, they lost like a third of their yield because of the pathogen. So for a population that relied almost exclusively on this single food source, you can imagine the devastation as far as hunger. They say like of the people that actually died in Ireland, most of the deaths were actually related to like illnesses as a result of being malnourished. So you not only do you have deaths just because of starvation, you also have deaths because of illness related to being hungry. Um, and then there were a lot of people that emigrated from Ireland at the time as well. And then some other refugees that, had to find elsewhere to live. So they lost about like half of their population at the time. I think they lost 4.5 million between deaths and immigration. And it's something that I mean, the Irish population only like within like the last 2 or 3 years got back up to the pre-potato famine population. So it's been something that, the nation has struggled to like, build back from with like a lower population. But it also brought about kind of the birth of plant pathology. So this was from this like disaster, I'll say, a scientist named Anton de Berry, I believe he was a Scottish scientist, decided to look into this problem a little bit more, and he's the one that found the pathogen. I think at the time he called it a fungus, but later we would separate fungi from oomycetes. But he found the pathogen or the problem with the potatoes that was causing the low yielding potatoes to be what we'll call a fungal-like organism called Phytophthora infestans. Um, and like another tricky thing about this disease and this problem is that the like Irish would harvest seemingly healthy potatoes that would later rot in storage. So they might think that they had enough to overwinter, but the pathogen is just kind of lurking and can still cause issues after harvest. Um, so yeah, Anton de Berry was the first, we call him the father of plant pathology. He was the first to go through a process that we call Koch's postulates. This is a like basic concept in microbiology, where but for plants, we'll say you like observe a plant with a problem and like note its symptoms. You isolate a pathogen from that tissue and characterize it. And then you take that pathogen that you've isolated and infect a healthy plant and hopefully observe the same symptoms as you did in the first step. And then you re-isolate the pathogen. So you're like confirming that, oh yeah, this is the thing that's causing the symptoms I'm seeing. So yeah, that was the first incidents that we had in history of Koch's postulates for plant pathogens, and led to a whole field of study on what makes plants sick.
And that's why you're sitting there now in a corgi outfit.
Mhm.
And do you use that same process, Koch's postulate, even today?
So in the diagnostic lab, we're using what scientists have like identified on plants in the past. So we generally know like what pathogens cause disease on different plants. So when we isolate or observe symptoms on a plant, but generally isolation, and we can characterize whatever we isolate, and if we know, or we can associate things that we've isolated or detected with that plant, and like the symptoms make sense, you know, match and everything. That's where we stop. We don't have to go through the re-inoculation and re-isolation process, because we have kind of an established list of, or like established known pathogens causing disease on different plants. However, if we were to, you know, get a sample that we isolated something that's known to be a plant pathogen, but not typically known to happen on that host, that's when we might go through Koch's postulates, and then we'd also do some molecular identification to complement that, and that's where we get the incidence, or like the publications of scientists putting out what we call first reports, where it's like the first report of this pathogen causing this disease on this host. And those don't happen as often as they probably used to. They do publish them by state, so you know, it depends on what state you're in. But pathogens aren't moving a whole lot to have you know, those happen very frequently.
Saying this disease is still around today, right? And it doesn't just
It
affect
is.
potatoes.
Correct. It affects solanaceous plants, so your potatoes, tomatoes. I believe it also affects eggplant, but I know for sure tomato and potatoes. I believe in Wisconsin, they have like a late blight watch, or sorry, yeah, this is late blight. So there are two blights on solanaceous crops: early blight and late blight. Early blight's caused by a real fungus, late blight's caused by this fungal-like organism, and can be pretty like devastating. So I believe in Wisconsin they have some kind of a like late blight watch website where you can like, because they grow a lot of potatoes in Wisconsin. Um, so um, so yeah, it's something that we still have to worry about.
And then potatoes, it's so easy to spread because you cut a potato in half, boom, you got 2 potato plants. And
Yep.
that's just how it's so easy to propagate that, but they're genetically identical.
Yeah, that's how they think it got to Ireland. So obviously well, not obviously, I'll say, if you don't know, potatoes like they originated from Peru, from South America. And so you know, they weren't originally, or they're not like native to Ireland. But because of like the increase in like global trade and like movement of stuff in the 1800s, they believe that this disease, once I figured out it was a disease, was pretty bad on potatoes in the eastern United States in the early 1840s. I forget which years. And then they suspect that some seed stock or something was moved from the eastern United States to Ireland, that was infected without knowing it. And that's likely how the pathogen found its way to Ireland to cause the devastation. And you know, with any plant disease, having you have to have the right environmental conditions for the disease to be really bad. And so it just I mean, that plays into like the recipe for disaster, but that's something that you can't control as the environment. It just happened to be that there were a few years out of a handful of years that were really favorable to the disease, and it just caused, I can't imagine the amount of like pain and suffering that caused.
Mhm. So, okay, random off the wall question. So we spend billions of dollars on our modern day kind of grain genetics that help to feed the world, do all that. Is that ever a risk for those? That some pathogen just coming through wiping it out if the environment is favorable for something? Or is that your job? You're like frontline making sure this doesn't happen.
Well, I believe that, they do have like resistance in like potato and tomato. Um, and the like development of like epidemiological models to help predict when these things might be evident, in addition to, any like chemical sprays or seed treatments, like we and then like crop rotation, like we have a lot of tools now that we know that these things can happen and that we can't control the environment. We do a lot of other things to try and prevent it, limit it, or at least like be aware of when it might happen so we can implement different measures to manage it.
So the world needs
So,
Chelsea. Mhm.
or like
We
plant
need you.
pathologist. I'm not the potato person.
I'm calling you every time.
Well, and to further complicate it, this may be getting into the weeds too much, but isn't there different races and biovars and all that stuff too
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
complicates the whole resistance and all that?
Yep, that's the same. Like, I'm more familiar with like Phytophthora and soybeans, and yeah, it's the same thing. You've got like different races, different, like resistance genes in the potatoes or tomatoes, and yeah, there are some of those like genetic, um, what would we say call them, like um groups of the pathogen that are of a like genetic makeup that are more problematic than others. And yeah, yeah, it gets complicated. Um, and I'm not a potato expert. I do remember learning about that though. Yeah.
Remember,
I think it's like pretty similar like across like Phytophthora.
all right, so I think we had one more disease that we're going to talk about, and for me personally, I wouldn't be too upset if this happened. But
I'm terrified.
what about coffee? Is there a disease of coffee that can cause some problems for us?
Yeah, so this disease on coffee, the disease is called coffee leaf rust. It's been around pretty much like as long as coffee. Um, and it is something that is becoming more problematic, largely with like climate change. Um, so we have primarily two different species of cultivated coffee in the world. We have Coffea arabica and Coffea canephora. Uh, Arabica or Coffea arabica we'll call arabica. Coffea canephora we'll call robusta. And this fungus that causes this coffee leaf rust affects both species of coffee as well as up to 25 other species of cultivated coffee in the world. So it's not discriminatory across like coffees that it affects. The Robusta cultivars are tend to be more tolerant to the fungus, but there's no complete resistance to the fungus. And the Coffea arabica is the tastier coffee. It's one that is cultivated at higher elevate like needs to be cultivated at higher elevations to or it's just like where it needs to be cultivated. But it's the better tasting coffee. And this species is particularly susceptible to the coffee leaf rust fungus, which has like, I think, one of the coolest names of like any plant pathogen Latin binomial. The coffee leaf rust fungus is called Hemilia vastatrix, which just
Oh,
sounds really cool.
I love that name.
Yeah, it's so cool. Um, and um, and so one of the like tricky things, I don't know, there's just a bunch of tricky things with this fungus. So typically rust fungi can have like, to complete their life cycle, they can either do it on one host, which they're called an autoecious rust fungus, or they need two hosts to complete their life cycle, so then they're an heteroecious host. The weird thing about coffee leaf rust is that there's been no alternative host found, but it does produce, so there are up to 5 spore types that rust can produce. The Uridenia spores are the bright orange ones that we tend to think of as like the rusty stuff. The teliospores are, the Uridenia spores turn into teliospore, like get, or eventually turn into teliospores. And then the teliospores produce basidiospores. You have sexual reproduction happening from teliospore to basidiospore. However, we've only ever observed the coffee leaf rust fungus on coffee. So we have what theoretically should be a genetically like homogeneous fungus in coffee leaf rust that actually isn't genetically homogeneous, even though we can't find that alternative host where, it would theoretically complete its life cycle and, increase the genetic diversity of the fungus. And so what some researchers have found is they believe the Hemilia vastatrix to be what's called cryptosexual fungus, where they believe there's like a hidden meiosis, or like, sexual reproductive or like interchanging of genes between nuclei happening in the uridenial stage. So we have a fungus that, even though you would think it would be homogeneous genetically, is actually like, can be pretty diverse, which can cause issues with, fungicide resistance, or even like breeding programs. Like if you're trying to breed resistance to the fungus, you don't have like a single genotype of the pathogen that you can try to breed resistance for. And with climate change, this disease is becoming much harder to manage in coffee. And I heard someone say on a podcast somewhere that like coffee farmers are saying that, like, we might only have like 30 harvests left, like before, like, we just like can't do anymore because of this fungus. So it could be really, really devastating. I love coffee. I can't tell you if the caffeine actually does anything for me, because I can drink coffee and take a nap immediately afterwards. I just love the flavor. And I mean, coffee culture is huge in America, and I would say all over the world. So it would be a really, really scary thing to lose coffee. What are we gonna do?
I don't know what we would do.
You end up like me.
Ken, you're high on life.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. So coffee leaf rust is actually like the reason that like the British are tea drinkers. They colonized, they called it Ceylon back in the day. I believe it's modern day Sri Lanka. And decided, like there were like coffee houses, they call them, back in the day in Europe, where like sophisticated people would meet and like talk ideas and stuff, talk shop. And they served coffee there. And so the British wanted to start growing coffee somewhere. They picked this island of Ceylon to grow coffee, which happened to be a perfect environment for coffee leaf rust. It decimated their coffee crop, and they found that environment to be much better for growing tea. And so they gave up on coffee and became tea drinkers. So I guess if the Brits can deal with it, everybody else can. But will we be happy about it? No.
Nope. Mocha tea doesn't sound good. Yeah.
No.
Mm-mm. Give me a little chocolate in my tea. Yeah.
He's gross
Yeah,
too.
so it's a scary thing. There's, I mean, like we could talk, in another day about some other, like there's a threat to bananas because of plant disease. There's a threat to oranges because of a plant disease. There's like plant diseases can cause some pretty big, I don't know, I would say like shifts or changes in the global food system, especially with how globalized we are now.
But fortunately, when that happens, we don't start burning people at the stake. So
Yeah, we know
at
we
least
know a lot better.
we've come that far.
Yeah, at least.
Yes. Oh my goodness.
Can't say we've done a lot more other than being able to distinguish between ergotism and witchcraft.
Mm-hmm. Every day I try, I'm making little baby steps. So, yep, I shun my children constantly. That's just because they come home with the flu. It's obviously was given to them by some type of wizard.
Yeah.
Yep. Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, that was a lot of great information about some spooky plant diseases, and you've kind of primed us for future spooky diseases with bananas and oranges and cacao. All that stuff is just yikes. Well, I will say the Good Growing Podcast is a production of University of Illinois Extension, edited this week by Ken Johnson. A special thank you, Dr. Chelsea Harbach. Thank you so much for being with us, coming across the Mississippi River into Illinois to chat with us today. Thank you so much.
Literally anytime. And can I plug real quick, my friend and colleague has a podcast called I See Dead Plants, and he has an episode specifically on coffee leaf rust. That if you want to know more about coffee leaf rust, I highly recommend listening to that episode. It's really enjoyable.
Oh,
I'm biased.
Oh, I know you are. Yes, you kind of like those a lot.
Yeah.
And so we'll leave a link to I See Dead Plants in the show notes below. I think when Ken and I visited, we actually met this gentleman. He just emerged from his office after recording an episode of I See Dead Plants. So yes, he was. It's a good podcast. So folks, check it out, and then come and listen to the next one of these.
Yeah.
We don't make any money off of this, not really. We just like what you hear in our voices every day.
Mm-hmm.
And Ken, thank you very much for being with me as always every single week. This week dressed as Yukon Cornelius from the Rudolph Show.
Yes, thank you, Chelsea. It's been fun.
Yeah.
Looking forward to doing this again.
Thank you guys for having me. Yep. Anytime.
And Chris, thank you, and let's do this again next week.
Oh, we shall do this again next week. We are going to be talking about community tree care and how we can help train homeowners and arborists with an upcoming webinar series. We're going to be talking with Sarah Vogel and/or Jenny Lee, one of them or both of them. We will find out next week. So listeners, thank you for doing what you do best, and that is listening. Or if you're watching this on YouTube, watching. And as always, keep on growing. You guys sound really smart right now. I don't know what you're talking about, but okay.
I don't either. I don't remember.